No, you're good.
Sounds good. I will call this meeting to order then at 5:36 p.m. So for attendance, we have everyone here except for Judy. Bjorn will be coming late, Stephanie's out, and Sean and Fung are out as well. We will move on with the agenda approval then. If everyone can look at the agenda first, and then if there is any discussion, go ahead. Seeing no discussion, can I entertain a motion to approve the agenda? Joffrey motions. And is there a second? I see Naif seconds that, and we will move to a vote. All in favor of approving today's agenda? All opposed? Any abstentions? And I do see Bjorn coming in the meeting right now, but motion passes 600 or 500, my bad. Counted myself. Now we can move on to the approval of last week's minutes. If you all have looked at that, go ahead and have discussion if there is anything to add. Seeing no discussion, we can move to a vote. Can I entertain a motion to approve last week's minutes? Andrea motions, and is there a second? Bjorn seconds that. All those in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 500. And now we can move forward to reports. I do not have any reports, so we can go to Joey and Lacey.
I do not have any reports.
The only report I have beyond the items you'll see down below that we'll touch on is just we did get the updated annual report from Central News Watch today. We're able to meet with them and make those adjustments. And so that'll be posted on the website, and everything in terms of the annual reports is up to date.
Okay, thank you, Joey and Lacey. And Joffrey, do you have any reports for us?
Yes, the resolution was signed and I have sent it to Joey, and I hope everyone has got a copy, or maybe not. And if not, you'll see it shortly. And that is the end of the report, I think.
Okay, thank you, Joffrey. Other business, communications received. No communications received. We'll go to first call for public comment.
I hear public comment coming from behind
you. Seeing no public comment, we can move on to new business, but in the agenda, it seems like there's no new business. So we can move on to old business regarding what Joffrey just said of ASCWU's response or resolution.
Yes, and so I just sent, and so Haley, you'll see it in the background. I just forwarded it to ask Haley if she could send it to you all, but I will just share what it is right now. I'm going to try and pull it up in the background. Since I'm at home, I have one screen, so we'll see how this goes. Share my screen. So this just came in today, and you can see, maybe you can see, give it a sec. There, now you can see. Can you see the resolution on there? Okay, great. So this is the resolution that came in today from ASCWU. I'll kind of briefly go through it quickly, and then Joffrey add anything in addition, but I think the resolution kind of speaks there, and then we can answer any questions, kind of discuss this. And then this will kind of segue into the next agenda item because they do go together. And so after I read this, I may just quickly give an update on that, and then we'll have discussion on both, if that's okay, Deanna. Great. So again, ASCW student government. So this is a modified, so as you can see on the resolution, talking about removing faculty and staff as voting members, does say they're drafted by a CWU president, and it was signed by the exec board back in May of 2021 and modified by ASW executive president and the current board this week in February of 22. So whereas Central Washington University Service Activities Fee Committee is comprised of 12 voting members, with 3 of them being faculty, 1 administrator for the president's cabinet, and 8 students, whereas students are assessed a quarterly S&A fee intended to support student success through extracurricular activities, resources, and support services, whereas faculty, staff, and administration are not assessed this quarterly S&A fee, whereas the S&A committee should only have students as voting members since faculty, staff, administration do not pay the fee, whereas faculty could have a conflict of interest if a recognized club or group of students from their same academic department is requesting from the S&A committee, whereas the number of student representatives is not equitably proportionate to the number of colleges at the university. Be it therefore resolved that the faculty and administrative members are removed as voting members on the S&A committee. Be it also resolved, advisors and the chair of the S&A committee look at best practices within higher education institutions in the nation for having faculty, staff, and administrators serve as voting members on this committee. Be it therefore resolved that the S&A committee should increase the number of student representatives to 13 students, 3 student representatives from each of the 4 university colleges, plus the ACW executive president. Be it finally resolved that CWU administration and the S&A committee maintain communication with the associated students of CWU with the progress of this resolution. So that was the resolution. Just got it this afternoon. I think it was about 4:30 when it came in within that. And so I'm going to briefly share the subcommittee and the process part first, and then kind of open it up to questions, if that is okay. Thank you, Haley. I just saw the chat in the comments. So just as the update on the other part of it, I'm going to leave that up on the screen so you all can see it for a minute for those who are not auditory. Again, you'll have the email from Haley that you should see as well. But the subcommittee met this afternoon. I had our initial meeting. Really, and the game plan is we're not just looking at the part of the S&A policy that pertains to the committee membership. That's kind of the part where this resolution is specifically touching on, but really the subcommittee and what will come forward to you all is a full review of the S&A policy and any recommendations on updates to language or process or procedure. And so the way that process really works is the subcommittee is going to be working on that over the next 2 or 3 weeks. We have a meeting scheduled next Wednesday for us to come back together after everyone going through the full policy itself and providing comments and edits. And so we'll have an update next week. But our intent, at least at this point, is to bring to the committee either 2 weeks from today, or depending on the amount of potential changes, 3 weeks from today, to bring to you all the potential updates to the policy at that point. The other part for you all to know in terms of the process is we'll bring forward what the subcommittee has kind of drafted as recommendations. You all will have the chance to talk about it, make adjustments, and then essentially you all will make a motion to move forward the whatever proposed changes to the policy. At that point, it goes 2 different directions. One is Joffrey takes those proposed recommendations back to ASCWU and reports back to the committee saying, here's ASCWU's response, fully in support, or we have questions, or whatever it may be. He'll report that back. The other part actually goes up, and I know I've shared this before, but as a reminder, through the university's policy review and approval process. And so once the committee has made their recommendation, I take that to the Dean of Students, Greg Heinzelman, and we bring that up to Provost Council. And so the Provost Council will look at that. And that's made up of the Provost, all of the Deans, Associate Provost, Extended Learning, a whole host of them. They'll then review and make any comments or feedback. If there's any changes, those go back to us before anywhere else. If they're in favor of it, that then moves up to the University Policy Advisory Committee with the president and the executive leadership team directly. Same thing, if there's changes or edits, it gets sent back to us. If they're in approval of it, then it moves on to the Board of Trustees. Because as a reminder, S&A Committee is delegated authority from the Board of Trustees. And so it would have to go to the Board of Trustees, and then they would vote to approve it. And so I say all that so you all know there's a number of steps, a number of constituents. They're going to be looking at it, providing feedback, those different aspects. Also, the time frame, knowing Board of Trustees is meeting next week, obviously, we will not go before the Board of Trustees at that point. It may go at their spring meeting or their early summer meeting. And so what we're really talking about is these updates to the S&A policy would be in effect for next academic year. So the next committee coming in, the next executive vice president will be using whatever is put forward as the membership for the recruitment and those types of pieces. So again, the committee met today, subcommittee, we had our charge, we're looking at it. Each of the members is going to be reviewing and providing some comments and edits, and we're going to meet next Wednesday before our S&A meeting so we can give you an update. But with that, I'll open it up either to questions about the process, but I think more questions probably about the resolution that ASCW brought forward. If there's things you all have questions for Joffrey on or points there, again, that resolution is ASCW's recommendation to the committee on what they would like to have us look at. Ultimately, what the subcommittee is going to move forward and explore is what you all may discuss or decide. And there's not a vote necessarily today, but if you all are in favor of exactly what's in there or other changes, we can share that. I'll leave that open and then I'll share some more information with it, but I'll open up to any questions now, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Now that you stopped sharing, and I can't, my questions are I didn't actually open my email. There was be it resolved, something about advisors and but looking at other higher ed institutions, I mean, has that happened? Is that going to happen? Will we get a report on that? Is that, I mean, I just quite didn't understand why that was in there.
So I'll answer what I believe and then definitely chime in with anything, Joffrey. That was actually from last year's ASCW exec board had put that in as a piece last May in there. And I can tell you, yes, that has been looked at. I'm happy to share with you what we have on that, but I don't know if Joffrey had something else to add in terms of that bullet point before I share that info.
Yeah, the main goal of that part is entirely to make sure that faculty members explore other options via which they can have voting power other than S&A. For the fact that the S&A is should be entirely student voting power, and then the faculty members should explore other options within the faculty or within the department to exercise their voting power. That is the main course or the main reason of that part of the resolution.
Yeah, so I just kind of opened up from the email. Be it also resolved, advisors and the chair of the S&A fee committee look at best practices within higher education institutions in the nation for having faculty, staff, and administrators serve as voting members on this committee. And so I guess it doesn't make sense to me what that actually statement means. I mean, so that are you all, I mean, are you researching then other institutions that have something similar? And if so, is it S&A? I mean, they might not be called service and activity fees. They might be called some other type of fee. Is it the equivalent and the same kind of dollar amount we have here? What are the institutions? Anyways, I guess I'm just curious of that. And then are we going to have a document from that?
So I can try and answer all of those questions, Greg. I mean, yes, we've already looked into it. We actually had that data before ASCW last spring put it forward. I'll give you a breakdown. I mean, the parts I'm going to say on this is that I think the challenge and where maybe this is coming from you, Greg, is that it says be resolved that we look into best practices about it. but it's already made the resolution to remove the members and what the membership should be without looking at what those best practices are. And so I think that's where you're coming at, is like, why are we looking at best practices if we're already making this resolution without having the data? And I can tell you, we have the data. It has not been, we shared it briefly with S&A at one of our spring meetings last year, Greg, but it was a really quick, because again, we decided this was going to come for this year. So I can share with you what that is. I agree with you. I think that's the part here, is it puts forward the resolution for what they want the membership to be and for us to look into it, but they've already made that decision. I do want to point out, just for a factual basis on here, since it's on the record, is there are actually 13 voting members of the S&A committee. I know that said in there were 12. We have 3 faculty, 1 administrator, and 9 students who serve on the committee, just for the record on here, since this is recorded, and for later on, that we actually have 9 on there. So what I can tell you, and I'll answer this question, is that there is not an answer in the sense of, when we say best practices, that means something when we look at it in terms of research and data, what is shown as most effective. There is not a best practice out there for the makeup of membership. I can tell you, we've looked, and they are called almost universally service and activities fees. In Washington State specifically, that's exactly what they're called, because as you all, I'm sure, recall from training, it's tied into our CWUs, it's defined on what it is. And in Washington State, and there are other states who are similar, it specifies that the majority of the committee should be students. What we've seen across the country, they're made up a little bit differently. They have a variety of things. Most of them are still primarily student voice. Because it's so different, what the breakdown I can give you really, and what's going to be most comparable probably, is going to be in Washington State within that. And so I actually have this here in the background. I'm going to try and look at this while I'm talking to you. And I can share, I mean, this is a rough Excel spreadsheet. Out of the 6 4-year public institutions, because it's the public, community colleges also have S&A fees. Some of them have a committee, some of them don't have they don't share what the committee structure is. And so I'm really looking at the 4 public institutions, and I'm going to show you this document just for the sheer numbers. I'll then stop sharing, and I can share with you each one of the 6 institutions has the definitions of the membership defined very differently. And I'll give those in an example in a second, but let me share this with you. Again, if I can share my screen. And I apologize for how this may look. So, and this breaks off slightly. Let me do this if you can see the whole thing there. And so these are each of the institutions. And so they're broken into voting members and non-voting members, and the categories they're down by. And so, like Central, as we just mentioned, we have 9 student voting members, 3 faculty, and 1 administrator, for a total of 13 voting members. And we have 2 advisors who are non-voting members. When you look at Eastern, again, all of these are roughly, they have, again, students and faculty and administrators within that setting. They have 3 non-voting. They actually have 1 student who's a non-voting member, who's actually their student government president, who's present. Western has 6 students and 1 faculty, but they do have a larger set of advisors. And I can explain that when I give you the breakdown of how that's divided up. Evergreen has only students within their setting within that. UW also has only students voting on that, and you can see 9 and 11. And Wazoo, similar but almost an inverse to ours, has 9 students, 1 faculty, and 3 administrators, but they have no non-voting members within that. And so you can kind of roughly see the breakdown here. We actually have the highest number of, or are tied with Wazoo, but for the highest number of voting members on here within that. And so that's the rough breakdown. I'm going to stop sharing this though. I think that stopped sharing it. And I can fill you in. Here's the part where it gets complicated, is how those are divided up is by each institution a little bit differently. And so, for example, I'm going to kind of go in the inverse order. Like Eastern has 6 students at large One of them is their student government finance vice president, so similar to our executive one, and then 5 students recommended by student government. They have 1 representative recommended by the university's chief financial officer who votes, 1 voting member recommended by the residence life, or 1 representative from residence life who's recommended by their VP of student affairs, and then 2 faculty members who are recommended by the vice president of student affairs. Western, theirs is actually broken up by constituent groups. And so they have 2 students on theirs. And again, out of their 6 students, 2 students who are appointed and represent the student government, 1 student athlete, 1 student from campus recreation or intramural sports, and 2 department related student activity ones. Evergreen is just an open with theirs in terms of their makeup of having their fully their 9 students is just 9 students appointed by student government to represent the diverse demographics of the students, and that's about as far as they go into it. Wazoo, they have 1 faculty member who has a voting, 2 graduate students, and 7 undergraduate students, which includes their student government president and vice president within that. And then their administrators are someone from the president's office, someone from the vice president of finance administration's office, and then the chief budget officer for the university. And then UW, as I said, theirs is made up of 6 students, and their division is 6 students who are appointed by the student government, so associated students of University of Washington, and 5 who are appointed by the Graduate and Professional Studies Student Senate within those. And so again, very different breakdown and makeup of the number of students, whether there's faculty or staff who vote or who are there to advise, and the way that it's really divided up. Again, there's not what we would say, again, within higher education, a best practice. The best practice is to have the majority be student voice, and to have representation from across student demographics that would benefit or utilize student services. I mean, that's really the most that you see in terms of it. And so, I mean, there's a lot of recommendations that could be made based on that when we look at it. But to go under that resolution piece, that's what we had looked at last year. Pretty much, and you saw out of the 6 institutions, all 6 of them are populated with different membership, with different representation, with different, and it becomes even more different when you go outside of Washington State because of how they're made up. Some of them are very small committees. Honestly, most of them are not larger than our committee. I think the largest I found was maybe 15 members, but most of them stay under 10 in terms of voting members within that. So that is the advisor and chair research into best practices and membership.
Thank you. Thank you. And I, of course, the numbers are gone now, but it seemed like the majority of them actually still had faculty and staff as voting members. And I guess I'm curious about like how much the fee is at these institutions. I think Central is pretty high, and you know the stakes are higher with more money. I know that across the country, I mean, some of these are $20 a year for some students, so it's not a lot of money at all we're talking about compared to the millions that we have. So is there in our state though, I don't know, is that maybe it's more comparable in our state? Do we know those amounts?
So we do, Greg. I'll just jump in, Bjorn, because I know you have a question. So if I was at my office, I would be able to share those numbers because we do that data. But essentially, we do have a really high fee, but Western and Eastern are kind of catching up to us. So we are pretty close. Now, the biggest difference is their enrollment is a lot bigger than ours. But our fee is $237 a quarter per person at a full-time student. So, I mean, it's a significant amount of money.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, I had a couple of joint questions. There were a couple of committees in that list that use faculty as advisors. I was interested in possibly learning more about the stated role of those faculty advisors, or if there is a stated role. The other one is that I remember, excuse me, when Lacey, you showed us the chart of S&A fees, the one on that chart that was higher than us was actually like Portland University, something in Oregon. And I was interested in looking at their policies because I'm pretty sure their S&A fee was a solid $100 higher, but it might be worthwhile looking into if it hasn't been already.
Go ahead, Lacey.
So, I mean, I think we should absolutely look into that, Bjorn. I will say, just so if anybody goes out there and kind of does their own research about fees, Central is really unique because the S&A fee actually is 3 fees. And so the 237 is just what Central says is the S&A fee. But when you're talking about like RCW's like state definition, Central actually also has the student union fee and the recreation fee. We choose to divvy those up. So we have chosen to say that we have 3 different fees so we can be more transparent of where that money goes. So really telling the students like your rec fees going to the rec, right? And student union and so forth. But when you're talking about overall just RCW definition, I just want to let everybody know that those 3 fees are considered under the same RCW laws. I hope that's not totally confusing, but I think the point that I wanted to kind of like circle back to is some schools don't split those up. So we really have to do research on if that S&A fee is funding their student union building, because it could be that Portland, for example, and I don't know this for sure, but I think that's something we need to look into. Their fee could be supporting their entire student union building. And here we have 3 fees that do that.
Joey.
Yeah, so this is going to somewhat answer a question that was asked, but also to clarify, because I know we've been using it interchangeably, but there is a difference in policy and statute between an advisor and a non-voting member. And so to be clear, when we say advisor, and there's 3 institutions and we're one of them who have in their bylaws an advisor or advisors with all of those appointed, that is really someone whose job is to administratively help to set it up, who doesn't have a voice, not just to vote. Like you will see Lacey and I don't say whether we're in favor or not. Not just we don't vote in it. The advisor's role is really very much so like we will provide the context, like here's what we've historically done, here's what is allowable, here's what that would mean, or here's where we can pull that data. We may give recommendations in terms of language or things along those lines, but we don't, as advisors, say we would support this or we encourage you or whatever that is. Non-voting members have the ability to, they're essentially they're representing a constituent or an area to give voice within that and to have an opinion, but they don't get a vote. So they're really there to say, here's what I would say, and here's why that would negatively impact this area or not within that. So saying all of that, the only 3 institutions that have advisors listed in there are Central. And again, those advisors are Lacey and myself. Evergreen is another one, and theirs is going to be a similar to ours, is they actually have 2, but theirs is 2 full-time positions, a coordinator and an office manager who are fully responsible just for S&A within that. And then the other one that you referenced on there is actually Western. And Western's advisors are actually going back to their student makeup, is they have 1 advisor for each of those student represented areas. And so they have 1 who is an advisor for associated students. So I don't know who it would be, but it'd be similar to having, again, Amber, who's the advisor to ASCWU. So there'd be a staff member who is there to advise as associated students. They have a staff member from athletics, or who's representing athletics as an advisor, 1 from campus recreation, and 1 from department related activities within that. So their advisors are broken up into what their constituent areas are. And I would say the other part to keep in mind is their makeup is also based on how their S&A fee is distributed. And so when you look at it, those are all areas who receive funding or have programs and pieces under that, which is why they don't have academic departments within that. They have specific to those where the funding goes is where they want to make sure there's representation within it. The others that are really on there, the only other one that has faculty as a non-voting position in there is the University of Washington. And they have 2 non-voting members appointed by Faculty Senate to serve, again, as non-voting members. And there are 3 university administrative members who are appointed by the university administration within that. So those are the only ones who don't have faculty in that voting capacity. Again, if we were to move towards this, I know, I think it was Greg was saying within that most of them have faculty in some capacity. Evergreen and University of Washington do not in any way. And so if we move that, we would be, essentially it'd be half of the public 4-year institutions would not. And the other half do. We have the highest representation with 3. Wazoo and Western both have 1 and Eastern has 2. Again, I know you all don't see the numbers there in front of you, but I just wanted to answer that question about the faculty piece within that, the non-voting advisors, and clarify what that means in terms of a difference. Are there any other questions? I mean, either for Joffrey in terms of the resolution itself, or just for discussion that, again, the subcommittee can take back as we're reviewing the policies?
Go ahead, Greg.
So I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not. So this began looking at that resolution last spring, right? By the and even though I've been on this committee, I mean, usually something like this, something sparks this, something, this is a reaction to something that happened, and I'm not really sure what that was. Was there something specific? Was there, that brought this about? I mean, and as one of the faculty members, I mean, yeah, I'm just curious if it was something that we did, or where this began and what the cause of this, or the spark.
I think the hard part to answer that, Greg, is that it really stemmed from last year's ASCWU, who are not here. And none of those members are on the committee. It was really brought forward as a resolution saying we want next year's committee to look at this because we recognize it's the end of the year. Beyond what is stated in their resolution, I don't want to just speculate, because we could, right, of any of those things, of what they may have perceived. But other than that, we can really only go off of the resolution they provided last May, where it had some of those whereases within it. And then I know, like I said, we mentioned it again, that it was going to be looked at this year. Joffrey brought it to the ASCWU this year, so he might be able to answer some of their rationale right now. But in terms of what sparked it, unfortunately, we have no one here who was part of that process.
Yeah. So his name is, I just want to say this is not for any personal, thing about anyone or anybody or whatever you've done in the past or now. As the board, we sat and looked at this also with the board in the past, and is that students are really assessed these fees, and at the end of the day, for the fear of maybe potential conflict of interest or so, it is, we deliberated on this and thought that it's better that it should be entirely student voting for the money they pay for. we are grateful for your, wisdom. We are grateful for your knowledge that you provide to us and the guidance you give us, definitely. But again, at the end of the day, it's not something, against anyone. It's about for the fact that students really pay this fee and they really need to have sort of sole voting power on these issues that they really pay for. That is the main reason. It's not about any personal vendetta or anything like that.
Bjorn, do you have something to add?
I obviously can't speak for ASCWU. I know that some discussion was kicked off when I opened my mouth, as I want to do last year, and was like, hey, why didn't the faculty vote during the deliberations? Not that I was, I was confused and wanted to know like about policy. I know that was one of the things that occurred that caused some discussion in S&A. I don't think it was the only thing. And Joey, you mentioned that there was like long time discussion well before we came along. So I guess it's an ongoing thing.
Joey, do you want to add to that?
I had something else to say, but yes, I would add, not that there's been a resolution, there's been question, and some of this has been predates when you were even on the committee, Greg, which makes me feel like I've been here a long time. There's been questions, and it's varied, as you all have seen. Faculty, at least in the recent 10 years, have tended to abstain from most votes within it, and they've shared their reasons in abstaining. Most of the time, that has not always been the case. And so there have been questions about some of those before, or questions about if they're abstaining, but that counts towards quorum when we have a situation, and this didn't happen often, but there were times, again, if you keep in mind, we have a full committee is 13, so 7 is quorum, and we had times where 4 of the 7 present were the 3 faculty and the administrator, which means whatever votes happened there were not primarily the student voice within it. And so there's weird technical things like that. So that's the only part I'd add. The question I have is to Joffrey, knowing what is stated, I guess there's a 2-part question, so I can repeat them. One is under one of the as resolved pieces, it says, whereas the number of student representatives is not equitably proportionate to the number of colleges at the university. I was wondering where that was coming from in terms of it. And it's going to segue into my second one, because the existing representation says, so far as practical, there should be student representation from each of the 4 academic colleges. So I'm not sure where it's feeling that there's not the representation on that. And then the other part is there a reason that ASCWU is only wanting to ensure or aim for representation from the academic colleges and is removing what is there right now, which includes non-traditional student representation, representation from a student who resides on campus, and representation from the university centers? Because it seemed like 3 pretty big groups that we want to make sure their voice is there, and to exclude those. I just wondered the rationale.
To the board, it didn't seem clear that guideline that is in the policy right now, colleges and blah blah blah. It didn't seem clear, and so it was to make it clear that those represent that the colleges, sort of every college is represented on the committee. And to the board, it seemed very vague that they're saying it's not clearly that all the colleges are represented here on the board. Does that make sense?
Lacey?
Yeah. So Joffrey, I think that makes sense, at least to me. So I'm sure that was probably directed at Joey, but
yeah.
I think what I'd like to let everybody know about something like that is that in the past, we've had issues actually getting people to apply to the S&A committee and appointing. So I want to just kind of, like they basically express a concern that if we are that specific, there could be vacant positions and there could be people that are waiting to be appointed, but their college positions are full. So we could have have, you know, like 5 members potentially from CAW, but they wouldn't be able to serve because of the 3 maximum, and then we wouldn't necessarily be able to like get enough people to fill those spots. So I guess I would just be careful about that specific language, even though we definitely want to have, you know, diversity around our table, is that the more specific it gets, the harder it can be to appoint those individuals.
Joey, yeah, repeat your second part of the question.
The second part of my question was asking, is there a reason, or what is the rationale behind removing aiming for representation of non-traditional students, students who reside on campus, and students from university centers from what we want represented on the committee?
I do not, I think that the 13 pick or so of the number of students will definitely be along that line, and so it is entirely the next vice president also to be presented that, you know, presented a guideline of how best he can appoint those members from the different colleges or from the different set of constituents needed to be represented here as per the policy. Yeah, I think it's entirely on how over the next board is set, or a guideline is given to the next vice president to really first of all do a tailored awareness on S&A, and also a guideline, a set guideline set given for him or her to be able to choose those representatives as per the policies as per the S&A policy related to student representation.
Does anyone have any more questions? Oh, sorry, Bjorn, I just saw your hand raised.
Not a problem. I raised it just as you started speaking. By my reading, the resolution doesn't say anything about the one administrative member. Is in this case, is administration different from faculty, or are they lumped together for the purposes of this?
For the I think for the purpose of this, it's the same. At least according to the board. Maybe the language there didn't sit well, but according to the board, it's the same.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't read faculty and administrator positions are removed.
Yeah.
Whoop. Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Greg?
So, I mean, I feel responsible, like I'm representing all of the faculty here in this discussion, and Sean's here too, so he can pipe in. Hi, Sean. So, you know, I just want to ask the questions. I actually personally maybe agree with this. I mean, maybe this is a good idea. And at the same time, it's kind of like some of the rationale behind it is, you know, like the possibility of conflict of interest. I mean, that exists for all of us around the table right now, right? So we all have that possibility of conflict of interest. And because I've seen it, you know, and I've kind of even, you know, in my 4 years or 3.5 now, kind of scratched my head why even, you know, a faculty voted in this because they shouldn't have. And so I have witnessed that, and also a student, right? So it goes around, and I think it's integrity for all of us that we need to stand up to. And so I'm not sure what we gain by removing the faculty votes. I mean, if in all of this, I mean, I understand that, you know, faculty are not contributing to it, but then we look at examples across campus of where faculty and administrators are, making decisions on what students pay, and students have no voice in it. So, not that that makes it right, but that it's a small portion of this of the vote here, and so removing it. I mean, I'm in my 4th year here, so does it remove interest of any faculty wanting to serve? Also, I mean, like, what's the point of me being there? So it could be a consideration as we move forward with this, but I see both sides. So I'm with you either way it goes. Maybe it'll be my last vote, and
Sean?
Yeah, I think I'll just add a little bit since Greg called me out as well. So I mean, I'm on the younger faculty side. I think I did, and I know we talked about this before, but I came in I wouldn't say a precarious situation, but I came in the middle of the winter quarter last year during quadrennium voting, which is out of control all in itself. And I really appreciate, Joey and Lacey and what they all do with that. And even when Bjorn was on there, I think, again, I'm not going to speak for all of faculty, but I personally felt after talking with Joey and Lacey, and then even Greg and Terry Wilson, who was on here before, that was a faculty representative, was in my mind at least, I was going to abstain on certain voting regarding that quadrennium budget. Because at the end of the day, those were not my fees. That's the way that I had felt at the time. I think I continue to feel that way to an extent. I think if we had to do a tying vote thing and vote, then I would have done that, or I would do that. That's the perspective that I'm giving you just from my representation as a faculty member in our college. But again, that doesn't mean that that's for everyone. I think just like Greg said, whichever way you go, I think I can see both sides, right? Part of it is the politicizing a little bit, but the other part of it is what's most important for the committee moving forward. So I can understand both ends as well. I can see how faculty members do make a difference. And I can see on the other end how it could be a little different if faculty members weren't there. So I know that's a great political answer. I don't have a good one way or the other side of things, but I think that's at least my perspective on this. And thanks for calling me out, Greg.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for calling me old. I think you said that I'm the young faculty. So
He didn't call you. He just
Oh.
referenced he's on.
No, you inferred that. I did not clearly state it.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
I was kind of wondering, I know that appointments to S&A are usually via faculty senate. I know that the faculty senate earlier, I went through the minutes and checked. I think it's the January 5th minutes. The faculty senate sent us a communication saying, hey, until you get the faculty representation resolved, won't nominate new members. I was kind of wondering if there was some way to contact faculty senate. Certainly doesn't represent all faculty, but comes, I mean, if there's issues with speaking for all faculty that Sean and Greg are feeling here, would it be worthwhile asking? Because I just don't feel, I mean, I'm going to sound intensely ambivalent. There's definitely things to consider, and I just don't feel altogether qualified to make this decision without faculty voices involved or less involved.
Joey?
Bjorn, they did in that communication actually give their stance is that they would like it to be considered to keep faculty within there. So that it was there. There was not any additional rationale justification, just they would like that to be considered to, as we move forward, to keep those positions.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did not compute.
And I do just want to point out, again, as a reminder, because it kind of was probably glossed over for those who don't have to live in this world, Faculty Senate is part of the voting process as it goes up to Provost Council and the University Policy Advisory Committee.
If there is no more discussion regarding the resolution, then we can move forward to the subcommittee update.
And some of that we kind of blended together. I think the only thing after this discussion as an update again is the committee, the four of us are going to be looking over it in the next week, providing our comments. Given some of the discussion tonight and what's one of the resolutions that the current exec board put forward, Joffrey, is I may send a follow-up through you about that part of the advisory and chair looking at best practices, just to, again, as part of that, maintain communication with ASCWU to keep them up to date on that information and some of the discussion pieces. And so from the S&A committee, we'll share that out with ASCWU. Obviously, you can come and watch the recording if they just want to get the full from our exactly what we said, but we'll share that out here before next week's meeting with them too.
Bjorn?
Is the subcommittee still accepting new members? Like if people want to find themselves energized by this and want to join?
Absolutely. Anyone who is interested in joining us can let me know and you will get added to our Microsoft Teams group and can provide feedback. Thanks for the recruiting, Bjorn.
If there is no other discussion or questions regarding the subcommittee updates, we can move on to second call for public comment. Seeing none, we can move to adjournment. Can I entertain a motion? I saw Bjorn's hand first. And Rehan, do you want to second that then? Oh, yeah, I'll take that as a second. All those in favor for adjourning the meeting? All opposed? Any abstentions? I did see that someone left the meeting, but I believe there's still 5.
I wasn't quick enough on the draw, but I
got you. Okay, so motion passes 5-0-0.
I think it was 6-0-0.
Oh, 6-0-0. My bad.
Oh no, you're right. It was, yeah, 6-6-6.
Okay.
Everyone moves around when they turn their cameras on and off. So
6-0-0. Meeting is adjourned at 6:29 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
have a good week, all. See you next week.